Welcome to the only place where real, raw, and vulnerable conversations happen with IFBB Bikini Pros to give you an inside look at their struggles, strategies, mindset, passions, and all of life beyond the stage. This podcast is made to inspire, motivate, and remind competitors and the average gym goer that even the most extreme lifestyles and elite athletes have their ups and downs. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I'm your host, Celeste Rains-Turk, and now it's time for the Confessions of a Bikini Pro podcast. Today we are speaking with an athlete and posing and competition prep coach who has been competing for 4 years, and she works as a personal trainer for the last 8 years. She started her fitness journey 10 years ago at the age of 15. When competing as an amateur, she did 3 regional shows, winning 2 overalls, and then she competed in 4 national shows, placing 9th, then 5th, and then 2nd. I believe there might be one missing in there. There is one missing because I'm going to be asking you about that later. But this secured her pro card win in 2020 before going on to compete in 8 pro shows, which is awesome. And I'm so excited to connect with her and learn from her and share her with you guys. So welcome to the show, Hope Castelli. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you for having me on here.
You are welcome. I know that I missed one of those placings because it's something I was like, I need to ask her about, but we'll get into that in a second. I first got to ask, is there anything? Yeah, I'm like, okay, well, we left in the really appealing ones. So is there anything you do or think about right before your heel hits the stage?
Honestly, I feel so in my element when I'm about to get on stage that there's nothing really crossing my mind other than I'm just going over my routine in my head. And just at that point, like I'm pumping up and trying to really think about, make sure I nail my back pose. Cause that's always been like the feedback from the judges was my glutes. So like, that's the really thing I think about. Other than that, like my mind is clear. I feel at peace.
That's awesome. I love to hear that. Now, you said that your back pose has been consistent feedback from the judges. What have they specifically said about it?
They've told me that I need to have a little bit more depth in my glutes, a little bit more pushing back on that skin, just a little bit more muscle back there. So we've spent a lot of years trying to downsize my quads, and in that process, we've lost a lot of glute growth with it, which I mean comes when you're doing a lot of hits to try to actually burn off muscle. But then when you go to try to actually like pump up and carb up and whatnot, once you've lost that muscle, it makes it very hard. So then I have to get extremely lean in order to see what's actually back there. And I'm an amazing coach who is just like a little magician over here and does a phenomenal job with peaking me. But that's always been the feedback for years.
Oh, that is awesome that you feel so confident in the work you're doing with your coach and the peaking process. But I totally get that. I feel like it really does require like a magic touch to really nail every aspect of it. Have you ever felt like you brought your best, or do you feel like there's always been something kind of missing?
I feel like this season was probably my best in 2022. I knew going into the season I still lacked the glutes because when we started prep, we ideally needed to still drop some quad size. Like the moment I hit an off season, I don't touch my quads, but they grow. So I'm always trying to fight my genetics a little bit there. And so we actually lost 2 inches on my quads and 10 inches on my glutes. So
What?
yeah, to lose 10 inches on the glutes was like astronomical. But
Yes.
yeah, so I already knew we were going into it. And, my coach had told me, she's like, if we just go off season, like, I guarantee we could hit an early show in 2023 and you'll get that qualification. But I was like, oh no, like, I'm so committed right now. I was like, we gotta go.
I love that. Well, it's awesome to hear you feel like you brought your best in 2022, and to know that even better is coming is really cool. Now, are you still planning to compete at the beginning of this year?
I think that's pushed back a little bit due to the fact that we ended my season pretty late last year. Had I gone off season in June when we were discussing it, I probably would be hitting a show right about now. But because I didn't actually end my season until oh gosh, I think it was like the last week of August. We're trying to give my body at least about 6 to 8 months of rest. So hopefully in the next 4 months we starting prep, see what's going on.
I love that. And
Yeah.
I like how you put that too. First of all, you were like, well, I just want to keep going, so I'm not gonna stop. And I believe you had earned some points towards the Olympia, right?
I did. Yeah, it was actually at my second pro show I did last year. It was kind of a spur of the moment, last minute decision to hit Tahoe show.
Mm.
Um, but Tahoe show was my first competition I ever did in 2019. So I'd always wanted to compete at the pro level in Tahoe,
Yeah.
but I didn't think it was going to happen because I was competing on Friday in Texas and Tahoe was on Sunday. And we hadn't lined anything up for me to do that. We were going to go straight to Nashville right after. And then I had thought honestly that Tahoe show was on Saturday, so I thought I was gonna miss it, but I didn't realize it was Sunday until I talked to some of my teammates. And I called my coach and I was like, okay, I cannot, this is like a burning feeling inside me. Like, I cannot miss this. I have always wanted to compete at the pro level on this stage because that's where I did my first show. So it was like super sentimental to me. And it was actually great because my first competition as an amateur, I placed fourth in Tahoe show. And then I placed fourth at the IFBB level
Oh,
in Tahoe show. So it was super funny because I got fourth place at both of them. I was like, all right, I'm happy. Like I felt like I won. Like that was so much success right there for me already. Like not satisfied, but I felt so excited.
definitely. Well, that's a really cool moment because it's something you had dreamt about for so long. So to finally fulfill that vision, stepping from being on that stage as an amateur to actually stepping on there as a pro and trusting your intuition or gut feeling that you should keep going seems to be a pretty common theme here for you, where you're like, this just feels right. So how do you know when to keep pushing versus when to actually pull back, and like you ended up ending your season at the end of August? How did you know, okay, it's no longer time to keep going with my desire to compete more?
I play it off with a bunch of factors. Like, any athlete in this sport, we're used to being exhausted and just pretty much running your body into the ground to reach that goal, and we'll all do it. But there comes a point where I had to step back and think about everything in the big picture of, how many more shows was I going to have to do this year to qualify if I qualified? Like was the feedback going to consistently still be to grow my glutes a little bit? So when I went into Texas right before I competed in Tahoe, the feedback was I needed to come in a little tighter. So, we did that at Tahoe show. And then they told me, I come in really full, which I do. I have a lot of muscle mass that we have to burn off kind of throughout prep. So I came in really full, and honestly, Tahoe was my best package to date. And then we came in a little bit leaner for Nashville and Charleston. But once I hit Charleston, that was my last competition of the year. And I was backstage. I was getting super emotional before I even hit prejudging. And normally I've never done a show where my head's not in it. And I was backstage just kind of feeling sad because I was like, I know what their feedback's going to be. And when I went into the show that day with that mindset, I've never messed up a routine on stage. And I stumbled right when I hit my front pose. And I did great. Like, I watched the video, you couldn't even tell. But to me, like, right before I walked out on stage, I was starting to cry. Actually, I was talking to my teammate. I was like, I think I need to go off season. Like, I know what their feedback's going to be. And it's really, really hard to want to step back when you're so close. Like I got a fourth place win. Like I was right there.
Yeah.
So I just knew I needed to think of like the longevity in the sport, like cool, I could qualify for the Olympia, but you're just gonna get lost up in the lineup, like you want to actually be able to step on stage and people go, oh my gosh, that's Hope Castelli. I don't want somebody to not know who I am when I step on the most prestigious stage like in this industry.
For sure. I mean, honestly, I feel like it would be a huge accomplishment, but you knew in your heart like that wasn't the way you wanted it to be for yourself. And as difficult as it was to pull back, it sounds like Charleston was that moment where you're like, okay, I can see I'm not performing even at my best because of the belief I have and the feedback I've received. So it kind of reminds me too of a lot of the confidence that you preach when it comes to posing in general. You were able to recover from the stumble, and if it wasn't even noticeable, that's awesome too. But you've referenced how bodybuilding's really built a lot of that confidence and self-respect, and you want other people, at least when I was reading your mission statement, you want others to experience the same benefits. So when you think about confidence and posing, what do you feel is important going into your posing routine or even building it to support having that confidence, even through something like a stumble?
When you step on stage, you have to feel it like from your soul, from your heart, that you are it. You're beautiful. You look amazing on stage. Like, you have to know you're bringing your best package. And when you don't know that, the judges will see it, because whatever you're feeling, they'll see it. It'll come out in your posing. Posing is, at least for me, and this is how I teach my clients, is posing is a very emotional form of art. You put all your emotions into it. So when you're feeling beautiful and you're feeling like you are at your best, that's going to exceed out into your posing routine. But when you are feeling the emotion of, I know what their feedback is to me, and I'm not feeling on point, that's going to come out in the routine just as it did.
Mm-hmm. I love how you said it's like an emotional art form, because I feel like you see that a lot in the fitness category, and yet it's not always like mentioned that way in the bikini division. So I really like how you painted that picture, because I think that emotion can be like felt, like you said, like from the moment your heel hits the stage. And is there anything you do when you're working with other competitors on their posing to support them in bringing that emotion or bringing that energy out so they can display that or evoke that?
I have so many different tactics that I actually try to use with my clients. One of the biggest things that helps get people actually out of their comfort zone and learning how to feel sexy and sassy and beautiful on stage is sometimes to actually just get out of your posing heels and practice in your sneakers, practice your walk, trying to move your hips. Sometimes, even if you're going to go out with your husband or your boyfriend or your friends and you have a beautiful outfit on, to actually wear that and go through a posing routine, you can break down some walls that you may have had up that you couldn't figure out while having your heels on and being in a gym. But if you put a completely different outfit on, that can actually help too. So sometimes I'll tell my clients, like, hey, well, look, when we're done posing, like, if you got a nice pair of sexy heels, go put those on, go walk around, try to get that and bring it into your routine, because bikini is one of the most beautiful divisions in the industry. So we have to empower that. We have to bring that to stage. So you got to find multiple different ways to bring that out, and everybody has a different physique. So you got to just show their strong points. So whenever I'm posing my clients, I will show them what I'm seeing through screenshots or recordings or demonstrating it through myself. So that way they can see what I'm seeing from like a judging standpoint.
I like that a lot. I like everything you just said. I think it's a great tip, actually, to find other areas of your life where you're feeling confident or when you're feeling confident, and like use that almost like an anchor point of how you want to feel. And then when you do your posing, if you start feeling that way, you're like, okay, cool, we're in a good spot. We're in a good
Yeah,
group, you know?
exactly.
I love that. I also think it's really cool how you will point out to them like what it is that you're seeing. I think a lot of especially new competitors, I know when I started, I felt like really confused with the posing, like what actually looks good on me. Plus, it was 2015 and there was literally one posing video online, and it was a woman in a yellow suit with Sandy Williamson like pointing out posing. I don't know if you've seen that, but if you look up
Oh,
like,
I have seen
yes.
that. Yes, I
Classic.
it's a classic.
She like crosses her legs in the back pose at one point, and I'm like, oh,
Yes.
okay.
Yes.
I should go back and watch that and see if I can identify the competitor. I don't know if they were a pro or a amateur, but either way, when you're new in this sport, sometimes you really don't know exactly what to look for. You might understand the criteria or see other people who just pose beautifully like yourself, Hope, and then they think, well, how do I get there? But I think when you have a coach who's saying, hey, I see this looks really good on you, it actually can empower some of that confidence too, because a lot of confidence is bred with knowledge and experience and understanding. So when someone with those three things comes in and says, "Not this looks good," I think it can actually be like a boost for the person who's learning from you.
Yeah, exactly. And there's times my clients will hit poses and I'm like, hold up, girl. I was like, we gotta screenshot this. I'm like, you look dope. Like that is on point. And they're like, oh my God.
So what inspired you to actually start coaching posing? I know we touched a little bit on the inspiration to help others feel what you felt from your fitness journey, but what inspired you to actually like launch into posing and competition prep coaching?
The biggest thing that got me involved with wanting to pose is because when I was prepping for my first competition, the first 8 weeks I was teaching myself my own posing, and then I was like, you know what, like I need to get a posing coach just so I can make sure like I'm nailing everything on stage properly. I don't want to make a fool out of myself on stage. Like I'm very serious about what I do, and if I do anything, I do it to the fullest. And so I had a posing coach, and I ended up switching teams and going through different posing coaches until I found the right one that works for me now. But what I had to learn in that process before I found my posing coach that I'm with and before I ever started posing girls was what I teach my clients, nobody taught me. And so I want to teach them and tell them things that I wish somebody would have told me. I wish somebody would have told me to, hey, look down at your feet real quick and check where your feet are and how they're positioned. Nobody ever told me that. Nobody ever told me to try to bring your emotion into your posing. I learned that from myself through things that was going on in my life, that was just a way that I could express myself. And then I realized there was more to posing than just stepping on stage and hitting a front pose and a back pose and calling it good. Like there's more that goes into it than just what people think. A lot of amateurs too, they'll leave their posing to like the very last thing that they worry about, and it's like 2 weeks out from a show and then they'll start doing routine. It's like, no, if you set your goal like, hey, I'm gonna do a competition in 6 months and I'm gonna start a prep in 3 months, the moment you created that mindset of that you're gonna do a show, you should start posing then. And I have some clients that are posing with me in off season, and they're the ones that are going to exceed more once they're in prep because they've been watching their body in prep, in off season, and they've seen how they look. They're confident in who they are, and they're going to bring that package to stage. Whereas, like a lot of other people will leave it to the last minute. But you could have the greatest physique, and if you don't know how to show it on stage, you're kind of screwed at that point. So I just really want to teach my clients what nobody taught me and that I had to learn for myself.
100%. I love that. You mentioned a few things that I want to touch back on, but before we do that, did you have the same experience with your approach to prepping as well, or your improvement seasons, like maybe different approaches you took? Did that inform how you also coach your clients in that regard?
100%, 100%. I've had some interesting coaches in my time. I've had some amazing coaches. I've learned something from all of them. They've all taught me something great. But the biggest thing that was taught to me was to have compassion and be there for your client too, not just in a nutritional way and a training way, but at the end of the day, your prep is also a behavioral coaching, because if you have a client who's consistently messing up in their prep, it's a behavioral thing. So you got to figure out what's going on so you can help them to be a better athlete. A lot of coaches don't do that. There's very few people that do. And that's honestly why I love my coach that I'm with now, because she coaches the way I coach. She coaches the way I love, and she's there for her clients just as I'm there for my clients. And I tell my clients, I'm there 24/7. If you got to call me at 3 a.m. because you got to talk to me about something, go for it. Because at the end of the day, you got to keep your stress levels down. That's going to impact how you look on stage. If you got a question for me and you know that I'm going to respond to your text, you text me. A lot of people don't like to have their phone blowing up a lot of coaches won't respond instantly, and then it makes it hard for athletes to feel like they can reach out to their coach. Can I talk to my coach? Is my coach going to shoot me down if I ask this question? Are they going to build me up? And there's a lot of people I've been in this industry as far as fitness goes for quite a long time. And I've seen a lot of things through gyms, through trainers, through coaches, through different sports. And I've seen what works and doesn't work. And you just got to figure out what kind of athlete you have and work with what they're giving you, and then be there for them and help build them up to be the best athlete that they can on stage through any way.
Yes, I love that. Like, it's not just one type of approach that gets applied to everyone and then may the best genetics win. It's like, how do we capitalize on what you're bringing to the table to support the goals that you have? So, and I love that you touch on the compassion piece and the behavioral change aspect too. I think a lot of people come into a fitness journey or a competition prep also feeling like they are going to have to starve themselves and do like barely eat anything that they love and not be able to have time with friends or social experiences, things like that, just to get results in fitness alone, not even just in competing, but like across the board. And we see women starting journeys like so young. Like, I know that if I could go back in time and tell myself, don't be in a deficit right now. You are lifting, you're training hard in the gym, like eat your food, capitalize on the newbie gains. I would totally tell myself that, but we learn the hard ways. So having a coach who understands that too and doesn't preach that same narrative is important. So what do you tell people now when they want to start working with you, but maybe they're afraid to eat or grow, whether that's into an improvement season or it's to just have a lifestyle that's better?
I'm super open with anybody I talk to regarding health and nutrition, because when I was younger, I used to have a horrible mindset with food. I was a gymnast for years, and I ended up developing an eating disorder to the point that I was hospitalized. And for years, I struggled with it. And it wasn't until I actually found fitness, like outside of gymnastics, but like being in an actual gym. My dad actually brought me into the gym, and I was like, I want to go and lift weights. Like, I'm a gymnast. I gotta be light. I gotta fly in the air. Like, I can't be lifting weights. Not realizing that there was actually a purpose for it. It doesn't matter if you're a gymnast. Like, they strength train. Everybody strength trains.
Yeah.
So I found a different avenue, and over the years, I've encountered so many clients that have had such disordered eating or eating disorders or something very similar. And, a lot of people have food phobias, that they don't want to eat a certain thing because they're going to look a certain way. So it's like, at the end of the day, I'm very open with talking about what I've gone through to try to help people so they don't experience what I did. And I've had some clients come to me and they go, I want to do a competition. I'm like, cool, let's first off discuss what you're eating. And then I figure out what they're eating. I'm like, that's what the best athletes would be eating in a peak week. Like, you're not in a place to start prep. And I'll explain to them why. Like, your hormones are gonna be messed up. Like, you can't lower your calories any more than they already are, and you're already doing an excessive amount of cardio. Like, there's nowhere to go from here. The only way to go is to reverse and repair your metabolism. And I will always tell them, like, I've been on that opposite side of the spectrum of feeling like I was gonna gain weight if I ate a piece of lettuce. Like, I understand it's a mind game, and like, I'm very open with them, and I think that kind of helps to kind of calm that anxiety, because there is a lot of anxiety revolving fitness and food and nutrition, and I just try to lower that a little bit for people because I get it.
Absolutely. Yeah, your experience would totally inform like how you can support others who might be expressing something even similar to that. And you actually had considered that for yourself before competing, and you invested in this lifestyle for 7 years before actually competing because you wanted to make sure you were in a healthy mindset with food and training after that history of yours. So how did that past experience inform your outlook on yourself through your fitness journey? And when did you decide, okay, yeah, I'm good to go and actually compete?
So when I was 15, I actually had seen my coworker competed in competitions, and I remember I was in one of our training rooms, and I was warming up, and he came in with his tan on, and I didn't really know what bodybuilding was. I knew he competed in it. And I was like, wow, that's a crazy looking tan over here. And I had started looking into it. I'd started seeing what females were doing. I was like, oh my God, like I would love to compete. But I knew like I was still in the recovery process of my eating disorder. And so I just kind of put it on the back burner. I was like, you know what, that's like a really long-term goal. Like right now, we're just going to build muscle and try to stay somewhat lean, but keeping my body fat in a good place. And I was still at this point trying to work on my mindset because I still was kind of at the teeter-totter phase. So then over the years, I started progressing to lifting heavy, and I fell in love with the grind of the fitness and the eating and the heavy weight training, and just fell in love with it. And that's why I got into personal training. And so I started helping people throughout it. And over this time, I was about like 19, 20, and I was like, all right, we're gonna compete, we're gonna compete. And I was in a great spot with food, but I was like, you know what? You're only like 5 years recovered at this point. Like, just give it a little bit more time, because I knew once I stepped on stage, I saw it. I had been around it at this point for 5 years. I saw athletes would get on stage and take a 2, 3 month off season and think they could get back on stage, and they made the adjustments that the judges wanted, but in reality, they didn't, because they didn't let their body rest. They didn't put enough muscle on. And so I knew that I'm one of those like OCD to the point of like wanting to be perfect on stage, that if I ever stepped on stage, I would not want to take an off season. So I just made a point I was going to build as long as I possibly could and put as much tissue on. And then when I did my first show, that would give me a really good baseline for, where my physique was at and where to go from there. And so that's why I waited until I was, what was I, 22? I think I was 22, 21. Had to have been 22. It was 2019, something like that.
How did you know that that was like happening in the industry? Like, were you following bikini girls doing that, or were you educating yourself in some way, talking to people?
I was talking to a lot of people. I was starting to educate myself. I'd see a lot of athletes come in through the doors, and I would talk to them. And in this process, I had started competing in powerlifting. So one of the gyms I would train at, there were a lot of IFBB pros there. And so I'd follow them on Instagram, and I was watching everybody's journey. And that was, part of the reason I also got into powerlifting too was, my friend was like, hey, look, you're like a freak of nature over here. You're strong. Just come do a competition with me. You'll have fun. And it was great. I had a blast, but I also was using it as a tool to kind of help me get into that little bit of an adrenaline rush of being in a competition frame, a little setting of some extra pressure on you. How will you perform under pressure? You know, because of what you've already gone through with your eating disorder, how are you going to handle that? And if you can handle that and you're great, then perfect. You can move on to what you really want to do. So that was kind of like my little test on how I was going to be. And honestly, I didn't realize there was a leaning out process to competing. Like, I hadn't become that knowledgeable that I actually thought that that was how athletes looked all the time. Because if you go to a lot of people's pages, they're lean all the time. So I just thought that's how people looked, and I was like, I don't fit the criteria. Like, I'm not built like that. And then I started talking to more people and realizing there's actually a cutting phase. So when I did my first competition, I was about 2 months into it, and I was so shredded up top. I was like, I don't know if I like this. And I was like, nope, you set your mind to something, you're gonna do it. And if you don't like it, then you can just be done with competing. And like as it continued on, I fell in love with it, and I was like, nah, this is my sport.
Now, did you not think you liked the way it was looking? Because did it remind you of like eating disorder self, or the look anyways?
It scared me a little bit, because I remember when I had my eating disorder, I was super, super tiny. I was severely underweight, but I had some veins on my arms. And so within the first 2 weeks of prep, like I started having veins in my arms, and I was like, okay, like a little bit of anxiety, but you know what, we're gonna push through. And it was at that 8 week mark that I really saw how small I looked. And I think my my parents were a little bit worried, like, is she doing this in a safe way? Is she good? And I had a coach, and I was monitoring myself, and I made a promise to myself, if I ever had any thoughts again, like eating disorder wise, like that would be it. I would never step on stage again because I wasn't gonna ruin my own health again. I already put my family through that. I already went through that. Like, there's no point, So I was more so scared because I was like, I don't want to relapse. But because I was afraid of that, I knew that wasn't gonna happen. Like, I was so on point with not missing a meal. Like I would tell people, sorry, I can't hang out right now. Why? Because I gotta go eat. Like, that's important to me. I need to eat. I'm not going to skip it to hang out with you guys. Like, that's bad.
Takes a lot of self-awareness, honestly, and personal understanding to be like, okay, I'm not there yet. Like, I'm not in the place mentally to do this yet. Or I could see you were able to identify red flags, and you said you were motivated because you didn't want to put your family or your health at risk again. And you said that if you ever experience those disordered thoughts again, you would stop. What are some of those disordered thoughts that are, for you personally, things that would end it for you?
One of the biggest disordered thoughts is if I have gone the whole day and I've only had 2 meals, that's a red flag to me. Like, and there's some days where I'll get super busy with work and it's like 5 p.m. and I've had 2 meals. And I know that that's not a bad reasoning. Like, I just got super busy. But
Right.
if I wasn't doing anything crazy that day and I just didn't eat, that would be a red flag. So, like, that's why bodybuilding is so perfect for me because I have such a structured time of eating. Like, by the time I get up, within an hour of waking up, I'm eating. My metabolism starts going. My body's telling me 2 hours later, like, yo, girl, let's get some food in me.
Mhm.
But if I started to not listen to those hunger cues, that would be a red flag.
Got it. And it's awesome that your parents have been so supportive. How do they view your competition career? Like, are they all for the competing? Do they still support you?
Oh, they 100% support me. I think at first when I got into fitness at 15, that was probably when they were the most worried because I was like, I need to get protein shakes. I need to make sure I'm getting my protein. And my mom was like, what are you doing? I'm like, it's fitness. She was like, I got my eyes on you. I'm like, I know you do. But yeah,
That's
they're super
definitely
supportive with it. My mom's traveled to a lot of my shows with me. She's normally my companion. This last year, I traveled on my own. That's probably how it's going to be from now on. But she was always there with me. I become a space cadet sometimes, honestly.
well, that's so awesome. I love that she was there for you for so many shows and that you have their support. I could understand why they would be worried at first. Even you were worried. It's so normal for everyone I've spoken with who had an eating disorder background when they come into competing. It's similar to that because we can't deny that obviously the sport requires us to eat, life requires us to eat. And when you've experienced disordered eating or eating disorder, or you've been through treatment or recovery, there's a hyperfixation on those very specific variables. So when they start to play out in a different way, even though it's with a new association and a new intention, it can still trigger an old association that's linked to a previously unhealthy intention.
Exactly, exactly.
Now, you've posted a lot about how you embrace and love both your in-season and off-season body, which I really appreciate because I think, like you said, you were watching before you started a sport and you just saw everyone was always lean when really they were probably posting throwback photo shoots and not consistent physique updates. So what has helped you personally accept the ever-evolving bodies that we really do take on as competitors?
The biggest thing was for me, I knew, and I don't know if it relates back to the fact that I had an eating disorder, but I give it my all in prep and I give it my all in off season as well. But I think in order for me to keep a healthy mindset, sometimes I have to give up a little bit of that rigid side to competing when I hit my off season. And ideally, yes, I would love to stay a little bit leaner in off season because it would make prep so much easier. But sometimes your hormones get out of whack and then other factors play into it. Um, but I literally I let my body do what it needs to do. I stay on point with my food. I don't skip a meal. If anything, I would rather go over my macros than ever go under it. But I stay super on point with everything. And I have just over the years seen my body transform. And, if there's times where I'm like, oh my God, I don't look good in off season, I'll go and look back at, how I looked in 2015. I'll be like, hey, so that was tiny little hope. Look what you look like now. And then I'll be like, oh my God, like, look how far you've come. And so, that's what I'll do with my clients too when they send me check-ins. They're like, oh my gosh, like my weight didn't change. I'm freaking out. I'll send them side by sides. I'm like, yes, but look at the progress. And then they're like, holy cow, I didn't see that. So that's why I always try to show people, like, even if the scale doesn't change or if your measurements don't change, like, you're changing throughout time. And you got to be confident with what you look like both sides. Like off season's great. I got some booty gains. And prep is great because I'm shredded and I love it. So like I love both sides.
Absolutely. I think that's so awesome. And each season serves a purpose. You mentioned you have to sometimes really lighten up on the rigidity, and that's a message that I think is important for people to hear, because if you were always expecting of yourself what you expect in prep, but you're not always in prep, it's very unfair. And I think it's important to have the seasons, and there's a reason for everything. So how does your improvement season look in comparison to a prep?
It's honestly pretty much the same as far as like the meal prepping still there. I mean, there's more meal prepping involved
Yes.
in off season, way
Higher
more.
grocery bills, more variety, like.
Oh my gosh, I know. I was literally telling my friends, I was like, I swear I spend like double the money in off season with my food
Yeah.
than with prep. Like it's ridiculous. I'm like, I gotta eat again.
Totally.
But I mean, it's very much the same. My training's the same. My food is the same. I'm just eating more of it. My meal prepping's the same, maybe just a little bit more. But it kind of evens out because I'm maybe spending more time in the kitchen cooking, but I'm not doing the excessive amount of cardio. So the time evens out.
Yes.
Um, and there'll be, that I try to always keep a balance too. Like when I'm in prep, I really don't see my family and I don't see my friends at all. I'm 100% mind in the game. Like I wake up in the morning, I go to the gym, I come home, I eat, I do my client work, I go to work, I go back to the gym, come home, I go back to the gym, then I go to bed. It's like, it's so rigid. So when my off season comes, I make sure I don't skip my workout so I feel satisfied and I feel content. And if I have to push a couple other things aside to spend time with my family that day, I'll do it. And if it's like, okay, well, I was planning on taking a rest day tomorrow, but you guys want to, go to the beach today or do something, okay, I'll make today my rest day and just train tomorrow. Whereas in prep, I'd be like, heck no, I gotta train. Bye.
I totally get that. I don't necessarily have limited social or family interactions, although my family doesn't live near me, but I get that from that perspective of like how you manage your time and your workouts and your meals and stuff like that. It's like in an improvement season, it's much more flexible. Like, oh, I'm training X amount of days a week. We're going on vacation. Maybe I'll have most of my rest days around this, or I'm going to put my free meal here, or I'm going to have more flexibility in it, or I'm going to track my macros to a T in prep, but in improvement season, it's okay if there's a bit more flexibility. And I think it's like learning to navigate each season in a way that supports our longevity as individual competitors helps us to actually have more fulfilling journeys in this sport.
Yeah, and I find that I feel better as an athlete if I, like if I am gonna go and hang out with some friends and I bring my food with me and then they're like, oh, come on, like just have a drink with us. In prep, the answer is gonna be a hard no. I won't even go out. But in off season, in my mind, there is always that part of me that's like, oh my gosh, it's gonna put me over my calories. But I'm like, okay, it's not gonna kill you because you literally turn everybody down constantly when you're prep and they get it because you're focused on your goal. Like This isn't just some dumb little sport. Like, you're a professional athlete and you're held up to a certain standard, or at least I hold myself up to my standard. I think that's what it really is. But yeah, you have to be a little bit more flexible. And I try to make sure I spend a little bit of that time with my family too, because I know that they don't see me and my friends don't see me. So I try to really make sure that I can, say hi to everybody, do a little bit with everybody, and keep that balance and keep my sanity. So that way, I don't go into a prep and I'm like, I didn't do anything this year other than just continue the gym, and I could have skipped one posing session to go and hang out with my friends, like, so I try to find a balance and just tell myself it's okay if you missed one thing, like, you're on point. When I'm in prep, it's 100% on point. When I'm in off season, if you're 99%, it's good for me. I'm not satisfied, but I need to also not be rigid because of my path with my eating disorder, because I'll get into a nice cycle where I just won't see anybody then. I'm not trying to be a hermit.
Totally. I love that. Again, you're just very self-aware of like what's gonna benefit you in remaining healthy so you can continue this and you don't fall into a pattern of like, well, I've now broken my one thing, which is I'm having disordered thoughts. So it's awesome that you've discovered what does work for you. You mentioned something which was like your standards that you hold yourself to, and I had written down to ask you what being a pro means to you. So I feel like now is a fitting time to understand what those standards are that you set for yourself.
To me, what a pro is for me is someone who is, they practice what they preach. So I'm consistent with my training. I preach to my clients, I preach to my friends and everybody about training. I practice what I preach as far as my food and nutrition goes. Like, everything I tell my clients to do, I do as well. And if it's like a client tells me, "Oh, I feel really bad. I haven't been posing as much in my off season. I just got busy with life." I'm not gonna lie and be like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so on point and I pose every single day in off season." Like, I'll be like, "Nah, girl, you're good. I haven't posed in the last month. Life got ahead of me. A lot of things came up, some family emergencies, X, Y, and Z. Things happen and you have to put some things on the back burner." But as far as being a pro, I will never skip my training and I will never skip my food. Like, those are the two most important things to me, and it's like sometimes there's a little lack of sleep in there, but you can deal with that, but you also got to be a role model to people, because I remember when I was an amateur, I was looking up to all these pros, and nobody wants to see a pro that tells people to do one thing but they do another. So I'm very open and honest about what I'm doing. And if someone comes up and asks me something, I'm not going to lie. I'm going to tell you the straight up truth, because I wish people had done that to me when I was an amateur. I mean, I remember in my first off season, I went crazy with food post show, and I had reached out to one of my friends that was a pro, and she made it sound like, it was totally something that never happened and nobody did that. And I felt so bad. I was like, I'm not meant for this sport. I was like, this is honestly got to do with something with my eating disorder, that I just went overboard with food. And it was after that I started talking to so many different people and realized, like, that is something that everybody actually does post show. Like, and then I felt like I was just a small little, little ant when that happened. I was like, nah. So, like, I'm literally just going to practice what I preach, and that's how it is. Like, fitness is my life, and that's what it's gonna be.
Absolutely. Like being vulnerable and open about our own experiences and journeys, I think allows others to see that that's how it can be done too, and it's okay. And a lot of people definitely do struggle post show. I mean, that's my whole MO, is helping competitors with their food relationship, their body image, their goals, because those transitions can be really tough. And a lot of us have gone through it or been through it. You don't have to go through it as intense as many of us have had to before
Right.
you learn from it. But it's awesome that you had people who could support you and show you you weren't alone in that. And it didn't lead you to actually want to quit, especially because I know competing was a vision you had for yourself for so long. And prior to competing, you mentioned you had done two powerlifting competitions, and you had gotten an injury and you decided to pursue bodybuilding because you had missed qualifying for nationals for powerlifting. Like, I believe it was twice, and then you couldn't squat anymore because of the injury, and you're like, you know what, I'm gonna finally pursue bikini. So what did you notice shift in yourself mentally and physically when you did give yourself permission to go after bodybuilding, which is something you had been wanting to do?
My confidence grew so much because I knew that's where I belonged. Like, I knew that you kind of just have that feeling that, you know, that these are your people.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I had a lot of people telling me too throughout my first prep, even in the first couple weeks, they were just like, I don't know if it's that you're training different, but you're holding yourself differently. And I was like, what do you mean? They're like, you just stand taller. And I couldn't understand what they were talking about. And I thought it was like, oh, I'm, you know, more poised because of my posing. But I realized it was my confidence level actually grew majorly because I was competing in one of the hardest sports out there.
Yes, I love that perspective. So actually, let's dig a little further so I can understand like where you're coming from when you say that, because maybe everyone's definition is different. But what do you think makes it one of the hardest sports ever?
I think what makes it the hardest sport is, you know, and this comes from someone who did gymnastics. So, you know,
Yeah.
the training in gymnastics, you're at the gym there about 7 or 8 hours a day. So I was used to that intense level of training, and I was used to that intense level of training while not eating. So I did experience that, and to be able to compare it to bodybuilding, your training is intense, and then it's completely different when you add in the fact that you're eating all these calories and it slowly starts to diminish, but your intensity level in the gym starts to increase as your calories are going down. Then you have the mental side of it, which, yes, every sport has their mental side of it, but this can affect how your body looks. You know, any other sport, you're not being judged on how your body looks. So if you are being stressed out, sure, you could probably still perform, might be a little shaky, but if your cortisol levels rise and you look soft, that's not going to matter for the sport you're in. For our sport, your cortisol levels rise, or something is even a hair off, that changes drastically, you know. And it's like, you'll have days where you've slept 30 minutes and sucks for you. You got to wake up and you got to go to the gym because you got to work, and you got to go back to the gym because you got to catch a flight to your show the next day. Like, you can't skip anything. Anything's got to be on point. And it's like that for every athlete. You know, every athlete's training to the T with everything. But I think this is just a little bit more involved, you know, and it's very, it's very much so mental toughness that you have to have with this, because you're literally being judged on your looks.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly that. So yes, you're being judged on your looks, so then it's going to shift the way you see yourself too. And you got to stay strong in it, and know why you love it and want it, because the placings can vary, the results can vary. You can't predict a win, but you can predict, if you did your best, you know, okay, I'll probably feel good because I did my best, and that's all I can do. And you do have to be mentally strong. I love that you highlighted that piece of it, and it's a testimony to your journey thus far. And on the idea of placings changing, I had mentioned some of your placings that national shows when I introduced you, but I forgot to mention the universe placing, where I believe you got 16th after just competing at Junior USA's and getting 5th only 3 months prior to that. But then you went on to national championships and you won your pro card. Like, those were two very close shows at the time, right?
Yeah, they were a week apart, and that's literally where the mental toughness comes in, and the science. There's literally, this sport is a science as well. Like, I mean, that goes to show it there. I placed, I think it was actually 23rd. Not trying to make myself sound worse than it actually was. But it was by far like the worst placement I had ever gotten, and I was completely dumbfounded. I was like, what the heck? Like, I literally just placed fifth. How did I get in third call outs, you know? And then to go and step on stage that following week and get my pro card really just goes to show, like, yes, you have to be on point as far as like your confidence level, your mental side, like you have to be peaked properly. But yeah, that show was a universe. I was not happy with how like my makeup and my hair looked, and there was just so many factors that I just didn't feel confident on stage, which honestly you can now look back and see that 100% the judges saw it too. You know, my tan wasn't dark enough, so I got really docked a lot of points. But right when I got off stage, I had my little crying session. I went up to my coach and I was like, all right, just booked my flights to Orlando. Like, I don't even want to eat anything really right now post show. Like, I just want to get back to my prep meals. So what do I eat? You know, like, I don't want anything junk related. I want my prep meals. I want to get my pro card. Like, I was so in on it. I didn't really care about anything else other than just that pro card I was so set on it. And so, yeah, then when I won my pro card, like, that show felt different. I was so confident when I was backstage, and it was one of the biggest national shows. I mean, Universe and NPC Nationals. NPC Nationals is the last one in the year, so it was pretty stacked. And I remember right when I was standing on the stage, right before I walked out, I was looking at Tyler and Sandy. I hadn't even started my routine yet, and they were looking at me, and I was like, "Yep, I won my pro card." I was like, "I already know it." And I walked out on stage, and I felt so on point, and that honestly exceeded through the posing, because here I am, pro.
It's freaking awesome. What was it in you that had to change or shift to feel that way? Because some people would have like crumbled after a placing like that, after going from a high to a low, but you rose to the occasion and you showed up for yourself. So what helped you to actually like feel that confident going into that national show?
We did a little bit differently with well, as far as like my training, because I trained myself throughout all my shows. So I played around with a little bit of a different change as far as like my training was with heavy weights versus light weights. So before I went into Universe, I think I was like 3 days out, and I was deadlifting 220 for like 4 sets of like 12. Like, I was just going ham because I was like, they want more
Damn.
glutes. Not realizing that was also going to be flattening me out because of inflammation. You know, like, sure, I could have lifted that weight, but maybe for a couple reps and maybe a set and called it good to keep that density there and keep the fullness, but not to completely thrash my body in a peak week. So I changed that going into nationals, and nationals was my first national competition I did in 2019, and it was my second one that I had done in 2020. It was my fourth national show, but the second time I'd done NPC Nationals. So I just already kind of had a good feeling going into it. And I took work off completely and focused on what I needed to do for myself. And that was probably the best thing for me, because going into my peak week for Universe, I was working crazy hours, you know, just I didn't have my head in it as much, you know, because I think I was also like, oh, I got a fifth place win, like, and I was on point with my food and my training, you know, but I just think my mindset was like, oh, you'll get a, you know, third place, second place win, or you get your pro card, you know. But yeah, and then my tan wasn't on point. My suit was off. There were a bunch of things that we changed going into nationals. We changed my suit. I went back to my original one that I wore at Junior USA, is where I placed fifth. And then we made sure we put on extra coats of tan, and I even talked to Pro Tan backstage, and I was like, can you please add like another one? I was like, I turn green when I get tan. I turn green and it doesn't stick to my skin. I'm just like, please help me. And so they were amazing. So just everything just lined up great. My little brother came. It was awesome.
Oh, I love that. Is he into this as well?
No, he is not. He is a musician, but he came along for moral support.
That's super cool. Love to hear that. Having that support and all the stars aligned, it seems like for you, maybe that like Universe experience was kind of just like a good reminder of, okay, maintain that focus, control these controllables, and you knew what you wanted and you went and you got it. You gave that gift to yourself to put all your focus into it. And I'm listening to you tell these stories, and I'm wondering if there was ever a time where you wanted to give up, aside from that one post-show experience where you're like, maybe this isn't for me.
Oh yeah, I wanted to give up in 2021. That was there was a lot of personal stuff going on in my life at that time, and I never made it out of second call outs at the pro level. I also, my peaking process with, the team that I was on at the time, there wasn't anything super structured the way it is now. So, sodium levels were just constantly different every single day, and water never really changed until the day of. So, you had all these weight fluctuations, and it was a very, very hard time in my life is an understatement. Completely outside of the competition world is what was going on for me. So when I ended my season, I got into a really dark spot, and that, goes back to what's a red flag for me as far as like my eating goes on if I would ever like not compete again. And I had actually made the decision in 2021 that I was probably going to not step on stage ever again, because what emotional turmoil I was going through in that moment, I was so depressed for months that I had to force myself to make sure I didn't go under in my calories, to the point that I was pretty much just drinking protein shakes all day and smoothies because I couldn't stomach food. I was so nauseated from what was going on in my life. And I had kind of made it a point. I was like, I'm not going to compete anymore. I know my best friend was like, no, no, no. She's like, I know where you're at. Like, I'm not letting you give this up. You were there for me when I was struggling. Like, I'm going to be there for you. And so my best friend actually kept me sane. And she would drag me into the gym with her. And I was so depressed. And there'd be times I would just cry. And she'd be like, nope, let's go hip thrust. Let's go. And so she kind of kept me with that little bit of accountability there, because there was like a shred of hope that maybe I'd ever compete again. And I didn't become anorexic again or anything like that, but I did drop like 10 pounds. And to me, I was so alarmed. I was like, oh my God, like you just ruined everything in your off season when you're supposed to be gaining muscle, and now you're dropping. And so I was tearing myself down too. But then I kind of got my act together, and I was like, no, you can't let what somebody's done to you or anything, tear you down from your dream. It should actually fire you to want to do it more. And so I got my shebang together, and I actually ended up moving across the country shortly after.
That is awesome. And that alone is a major life change and decision. Was that because you were empowered after having overcome that dark period of your life?
Yeah, my family, they were discussing for years to actually move across the country, but I was going to stay where we were at. But Florida is just, how can you not want to move to Florida? Like, this place is gorgeous. I'm in heaven over here.
It is really beautiful, although I will say they don't have mountains.
I know, but see, the last 20 years of my life, I've had mountains, and I've had the skiing and the snowboarding. So I was like, okay, we get the beach now.
Where were you before?
Reno, Nevada.
Oh, okay, that's awesome. So, okay,
Yeah.
now that makes sense why Tahoe was one of your initial shows. I'm putting the pieces together.
Yep.
That's awesome. Okay, I love that. Well, I'm so happy that you're happy where you're at and you're living the dream for yourself. I know you've posted about loving being at the beach too, and it's a really great example of just going for it. Sometimes we just have to go for it, and it takes, special friends or people in our life to support us through those dark times. We can't really do it alone. We're not individual people, we're not meant to be anyway. Like, it's important to have community and have support. So I'm really happy for you that you had someone who could help you with that. Are you guys still connected, you and that bestie?
Oh man, we are. I'm gonna see her probably in the next month or two. I was actually on the phone with her right before we started talking. So yeah.
Oh, that's so cute. I love that. Is she in Reno?
She lives in Las Vegas. She's actually on the same team as me. We're both on the same team.
Oh, I love that. That's amazing. And long distance friendships are actually like really cute and great. Like my best friend, she lives in, no, it's not as long distance as, Florida, but she lives in San Jose, California. And we have calls every Tuesday at the same time for like years. And it just brings so much to my life. And then the constant, reels and TikToks or funny videos or random questions. Like it's so special when you find a friend like that. You got to hold on to them.
Oh, for real. Her and I start laughing at some of the things that we text back and forth. I'm like, if people only read our conversations, they'd be dying.
No, seriously though. That's so adorable. Oh, it's so true. They become more like sisters.
Yeah, exactly.
I love to hear that. And you said she's a competitor too. Are you guys ever going to do a show together or plan to?
Dude, we've been literally talking about it for the longest of time. It's funny because before her and I actually ever met, we competed in one of our first competitions together, and we didn't know each other until like a couple weeks after. I was like, yo, what's up? And like we connected instantly. And for years, like we tried to figure out a show to kind of hit together, and then I turned pro. And so, we gotta find where she hits an NPC show where I can hit an IFBB and we can do it together. So it's been like the long-term goal.
Oh, I love that. Well, that's super exciting and probably really motivating for her too, as she goes on her journey to earning her pro status, if that's what she wanted to do as well.
Oh yeah, I believe in her. I know she will.
Oh, I love it. Well, I appreciate everything you've shared. And before we wrap up the episode and get, how people can connect with you and work with you, I'd love to have your best advice for someone who has never competed before but would like to, and then your best advice for someone out there on their road to pro.
Best advice for somebody who's never competed that would want to would be to get a coach and start working with them now. Not to diet you, but to help teach you the nutrition, to help get your calories up so you're actually eating the right amount of food so you can put on muscle mass and actually put your training to use. You don't want to be training for years and your nutrition's not there, and then it's, you could have made more progress. And then just having someone who's going to teach you in the gym. If you don't know what you're doing, get a trainer or talk to your coach and have them design workouts for you. And I mean, that's what I do for my clients. Like I take care of their nutrition and I have all their workouts programmed for them so they don't have to think about anything. And then for someone who is trying to turn pro, baby girl, just keep that confidence level up. Like you're getting on that national stage. You're already up on stage with some of the best athletes. Because you got to think, if you're getting on stage, one or two of the girls you're in your class with are going to be pro if you are not one of them. So you got to think you're already up against one or two professional athletes on that stage that day. So bring your best, keep your confidence level there, train hard, and know you'll get it, because you will get it. It just has to be in the right time when it works for you.
I gotta say, I've never heard it said like that before, that you're already up against two pros on that stage, depending on what national show it is. And I love that perspective. I really do appreciate that. And like I said, it's unique, it's novel. So it's hitting a little bit differently as well. But I like that thinking going into it, like you got to be one of them or you're going to be going against them anyways. So
exactly.
that was good. That was good, Hope. Well, how can people connect with you and work with you or follow your journey?
You can follow me on Instagram at hopes_fit_IFBB Pro, or my website, posewithhope.com. I offer online posing, competition prep, lifestyle prep, glute programs, training. I do in-person training. Whatever it is your goals are, just shoot me a message. At some point, I'll probably give you my number so we can get on a call and discuss things. But yeah, I'm pretty open. And if you message me, I will definitely get back to you.
Awesome. I will put all of that in this show notes page. So you guys, that's always on celestial.fit/podcast. If you're listening right away, it'll be at the top of the page. If you're listening in the future, scroll down to the category section where it's alphabetized and you'll find Hope Castelli's name there. And then you can find not just all the links to connect with her and work with her and explore those options, but you're also going to see a full breakdown of the episode in summary format. Then you're going to see a summary of topics covered, bulleted format. And then you're going to see all the timestamps. So you can go back and listen to particular parts of the episode that stood out to you. And this helps you tell all your friends, followers, and teammates why they should listen to this episode. So definitely appreciate when you guys tag us and share it. It goes a long way for the podcast and for the community. I think it just connects us further. So thank you guys for listening, and Hope, thank you for coming on.
You are welcome. Thank you for having me.
You are so welcome. Hope you all have an amazing rest of your day, night, or morning, wherever you are in the world while you're listening to this episode.